Hey everyone, I'm Necromuncher. Let's draw. I immediately start by striking a pose using some circles and lines as a skeleton for today's subject. Some of you might already recognize the pose and the elongated appendages, which should become much more pointy as I add lots and lots of spikes. Because if spikes are cool, lots of spikes equals lots of cool. For any of you who watch this video in the distant future on a faraway galactic colony and don't recognize who this is, say hi to Denji, more commonly known as the Chainsaw Man. Now, as much as I'm thrilled that of all the 21st century Terran videos, mine survived to be watched to the 41st millennium and reached the far corners of space, some explanation is needed. Today I'm mashing up a horny chaos chainsaw devil human hybrid with the superhuman genetically modified hyper-futuristic soldiers known as the Astrades or Space Marines. To do so, I took Denji's demon form as a base and layered up bits of armor to match the Space Marines' chunky aesthetics. The armor will eventually be colored in a simple black and white to match Denji's original pants and button-up shirt. I'm especially proud with how I managed to get the design of Denji's iconic lumpy shoes into that of the power armor greaves. Obviously, for it to be a successful mashup, I need to add lots of extra bits and pieces like pauldron, partial gauntlets, and a jetpack. For now though, I focus on the billowing tie and Puchita's tails dangling out of Denji's chest. I try to have them leaning in different directions to give them a sense of movement or wind in an otherwise static pose, as well as somehow portraying different materials, weights, or air-resistant qualities. On his left pauldron, I put a skull that should look familiar to you, but at some point I change it to a different skull that matches the aesthetic better. Drawing the head with all of its sharp teeth, tiny mechanical bits, and various chords and lines, I understand why they chose to make him a 3D model in the show. Concerning about the perspective and alignment with all of these small parts might make someone want to jump into the warp with no navigator. After I finished sketching Space Marine Denji, I go on to sketch the planet he came to conquer, starting with some jagged concrete blocks and simple straight lines for buildings. I leave most of the background design to future Necromuncher, and I jump straight to start the line art process. This allows me to have clean strokes that still curve to how I want them to look. I wanted the collar of the buttoned-up chestplate to have some volume that would allow a tie to be tied through the triangular tie tube. It still needed to look sturdy enough to be a part of this heavy suit of armor, so the top corner was sacrificed and broadened. I aligned in the base shape of the other pauldron and the 8-pointed star-like design that would frame the shoulder skull. This is the point where I start thinking that instead of being an upright, honorable space marine in the service of the Emperor of Men, Denji is technically in contract with a chaos demon, which makes him a renegade. I personally imagine him fitting in the World Eater legions, screaming blood for the blood god before he jumps head in to feast on some demon's liver. Though, truth be told, most of the aesthetic for him I drew from the Blood Angels Legion, which is much cleaner in its design. Now I start making individual chainsaw teeth, which are different from Chainsaw Man teeth and Chainsaw Demon teeth. I draw two types of teeth and chain link connector between them. Then I copy and paste the pair all around the circumference of the left-hand chainsaw, modifying and deleting relevant lines to fit into the armed armor design. I make sure to also add the connector pieces after all the pairs are in place, to make sure it is a chain and not just a bunch of useless, albeit cool, spikes. With the magic of copy, paste, flip and rotate, I add the right hand and head chainsaws with ease. Our demonic unicorn horn still needs some modifications to fit perfectly, but those are also relatively quick since I kept the original chainsaw links in a separate layer for exactly this scenario. I throw in a long curvy shape as Puchita's tail and add some flavor to the pull ring to make it resemble a small paw. A much needed pair of armored underpants, probably provided to him by Makima as a form of control. Armored pant leg and knee pad complete with a shoe-like boot the size of his pauldron to provide him some nut-kicking power. Maybe in a more advanced model of the armor he'll also be able to pop those cool sheen chainsaws he got at some point, but for now the chunky boots are fine. I throw in some layers of metal to add visual variation and make the boot look sci-fi enough on one hand, but ultimately functional on the other. Some final details like a sole, then the right leg follows a similar process to the first, but bent to show that he conquered this rock. Here I really make sure to emphasize the shoe design, including the circle on the side and the long curvy shapes at the front. It just has so much character, and I wish I could have added the untied shoelaces without it looking weird on a futuristic Space Knight suit of armor. Almost last are the connecting pieces, like the elbow pad and midsection tubing. I tried to give them a bendable yet sturdy look, like the real Space Marine armor. Luckily, Warhammer 40k miniature painting and art is almost an entire hobby by itself, unrelated to the actual game, so I had oh so many available references. I mean, some people dedicate hours and days of their lives painting and customizing minis, and some of the results are truly astounding. As an artist, it makes me so happy, both to know that people love the craft, and that I consequently end up with metric tons of available references in almost any minor variation I want. Speaking of variation, last is Denji's Demon Head, where I try to add common elements from the Space Marine's armor helmet. They sort of remind me the old Bionicle masks, which is another franchise I love dearly. If I'll feel masochistic enough and won't have any better ideas, I might just make a Bionicle video someday. For now though, as I'm editing this video, I think I've had enough drawing mechanical parts and I'm fine with just describing the process. I add a large jaw protector and air filter with some spikes on top to protect the sides of the jaw and filter inhospitable atmospheres. Even though Denji is technically immortal, it doesn't mean he has to suffocate. I changed the shape of Denji's ugly lower jaw to something more intimidating and fitting. One of his many teeth is lined once, then I copy, paste and distort the upper and lower rows to fit into the mouth. I add tons of lines to make the power cords that simulate the muscle tissue and tendons in Demon Denji's neck. Then, after some crucial line layers cleanup, we're off to coloring. Some of you who saw my previous videos and actually paid attention to what I'm doing instead of just having it play on the other screen while you do something that is probably more important, might notice that I start coloring very early this time, and that I haven't even started to line in the ground or background. Worry not. This is not because I too contacted Chaos Gods, though I did. I just felt that since this time the focus of the drawing is a single character, all the other parts should only complement it, and that I should flesh it out a bit before going forward. Also, looking back at my older videos, I saw that roughly 2/3 of the process is just some black lines on plain white background, and I wanted to give you something interesting to look at. At this point I decide that this isn't meshed up enough, and it leans too heavy on the Chainsaw Man design, so I give him a jetpack like all the cool Space Marines have. Until this very moment, I didn't stop to think whether the Space Marine armor is something Denji wears or if that's an addition incorporated into his demon form, like the chainsaws and weird head. I want to believe some Astrates Legion found Denji knocked out or straight up dead in his demon form, then said, "Give him a suit." If it's a part of his form, that must mean Puchita should have been armored as well before replacing Denji's heart, which is also cool, but less plausible in my head. Tell me what you think in the comments, I'd love to hear your take on this. I found it somewhat challenging to add the jetpack and coloring it in a way that wouldn't blend too much into the general shape, while keeping the grayscale color scheme of the suit. Also, at this point I still planned on having the sky behind be bright blue like in the Chainsaw Man poster, so I couldn't make the jetpack too bright. I ended up leaving it around 50% grey and let the lighting, shading and surrounding colors set the tone for it, which was good decision since I later go with a different color for the sky. In another attempt to break the literal monotony of the chestplate, I wanted to add a chest design, and again took inspiration from the Blood Angels. They have big winged skulls on their chest, which I tried to add at first, but then I went with the Puchita, because it's near Denji's heart. Shut up, I'm not crying, you're crying. I put a skull on his left knee pad and pauldron, then added a hint of wings and chainsaws to the right pauldron. With Denji's base done, next is the background, where again I was heavily inspired by the original Chainsaw Man poster. Only, instead of boring brutalistic concrete office buildings, which is a very human thing, I chose to go with something more 40k appropriate and draw on the Necron's pseudo-gothic architecture. I chose that mostly because during the Warhammer 40k research I did for this video, I fell in love with the Necron's mega edgy design and wanted to draw it. But also because story-wise I think this scene should be set in some sort of a battlefield, and maybe the Chaos Marines Denji is associated with decided to invade a Necron's base and show that they too have an immortal unit. I tried to play with some alien skull designs for the pillars, but it always ended up looking weird or plain bad, so eventually I just drew a normal skull albeit with sharp teeth and put it on a column. In the final piece, this column would be so deep in shadows its design would be nearly imperceptible, but at the moment of drawing it I didn't know that. So I added 3 sub-columns, a nice pointy plate with a small round socket, and a column base to give it some volume. I then tried to find a position for the column among the building lines where it would fit properly and, as I realized at that moment it should, draw as little attention as possible away from our single character. This again would be achieved eventually with the help of heavy shading, but for now the fact that Denji is the only thing with color and off-center pillar position is enough. I add some decoration elements to the pillar's alcove that would mirror the elements decorating the stained glass windows. I then add some more windows, smaller this time, and draw only half, since they will be partially hidden by another wall and be heavily shaded. Some copy, paste, flip, and distort, with a little perspective.
You know what I'm craving? A little perspective. That's it? I'd like some fresh, clear, well-seasoned perspective. Can you suggest a good wine to go with that?
Unfortunately no wine, but I go 3-for-3 with some well-aged foreground rocks, this time not hiding any feet but still giving some depth. A single character, not hiding feet. They warned me the internet would make me lose my identity, but I didn't listen. Also, the rocks provide somewhere to place a not so neatly severed orc head soon to be covered in what I can only assume is strawberry space jam. I struggled a bit with the orc style since there's the D&D orcs with a C who have a certain look, 40k orcs with a K who have a very similar but more exaggerated look, World of Warcraft Muscle Mountain orcs, orcs as pigmen, orcs as pig elf, Lord of the Rings movie orcs that looks like personified piles of shit, anime orcs, and so many others. I wanted to go with something less silly looking than the 40k orcs and somewhat anime to match the Chainsaw Man, but still stay close to the D&D orcs, which I love most. I ended up with a severed head on the ground with some undefined style, which is fine. I used the circular symmetry tool to make a base for cracks in the concrete. I use a somewhat similar method to how I draw lightnings, as I explained in my Lord of the Spire video. The circular symmetry is so that it would look like it comes out of a single point, which would be Denji's steel boot. I proceed to filling in the base colors of the concrete and orc head in grey and green respectively, along with the aforementioned red jam. Since red and green are complementary colors and the shades I sampled are very vibrant, the orc head took more focus than I liked, so later it will get a calm your tits treatment. At this point I think we should address the orc elephant in the room. Why is there an orc here, if this is a Necron base invaded by Chaos Marines? Well, one plausible reason could be that this poor chop chap is a part of an orcish looting band that came to scavenge whatever's left from the Necron's technology after the Marines are done doing whatever it is they came to do. Another reason might be that the Chaos Marines that recruited Denji also recruited some orc unpaid interns, and they tried to fight their way out, or just got under Denji's skin like Power does sometime. Or under my skin, like she does sometime. Honestly, I just wanted to draw a severed orc head because they're such an iconic part of the game, but tell me in the comments why you think this beaten, bloody, butchered bad boy belongs here. With the orc head carefully placed, I move on to add a soft sunset sky to set a serene sort of setting. The last lights of day radiate orange rays that will reflect on every surface, from the stone of the buildings to the various metals and glass panes of the multiple vitrage windows. I sample the sky colors to have a base for a coherent palette, then color in the small decorations around the window frames with palette appropriate silver and gold. One by one, all the window frames get this treatment, then I proceed to fill in the window panes with glass in sunset purple and sunset orange. I proceed to block in large portions where the light will hit the buildings, and I fill them with flat, soon to be fading, sunlight. Since this layer will be a very soft and transparent light layer, I'm not that much bothered about accuracy as much as about general shapes. I wanted to make sure to catch all the edges, wedges and ledges to give the whole scene a sense of roundness and volume. I follow a very similar color blocking process to block the colors of the shaded parts in dark purple. Again, this will be blurred and made somewhat transparent, so the general shapes are more important than the exact pixels. All I had to do was keep repeating that in my head to prevent myself from zooming into the single pixel level and make sure everything is in place. I then go back to the detailing comfort zone by deep shading the skull pillar, adding ornaments and fixing the lighting and shading throughout the entire background. I make the dark shadows darker and the highlights lighter, when I come to realize that this stained glass window doesn't look like a stained glass window. There we go. Fixed. I still wanted to add some extra light reflections off the glass, so I did just that, in the form of semi-transparent soft white triangles. Now, all of this softness, transparency and Gaussian blurs are to force the brightly colored background to highlight Denji and not draw attention to itself. Speaking of, I'm giving Denji a dramatic rim lighting that would frame him in a snug, lit outline. As you saw, I started by making a Denji-shaped black shape, then making it transparent and calling it a shadow. Then, I started carving little bits and pieces from the layer, where it would either be fit that light actually passes, or where it looks cool enough. Like with the background, I make sure to highlight the edges, since the human eye is drawn to contrast and I want to emphasize the shapes. This includes every piece of armor, every chainsaw tooth, and any other detail I want to pop. For some flavor, I pour lots and lots of strawberry jam all over this demonic messy eater, making sure it splatters to the right direction where it hits. The limit of how much blood I could have gotten away with here is very high, but I chose to be reserved and only sprinkle it for variation. On the armor, I mean. The blades are, well, too close to the action to be even a little bit clean. Once I'm happy with the remains of the presumed massacre, I decide to enhance the drama with some deeper shadows. Again, this adds volume to the shape and makes the whole image more intense due to increased contrast between the inner parts of the silhouette and its edge. Nicks and scratches make the armor look worn and haggard as it should, since it probably sustained heavy damage during many missions. Later, I also add some texture to make the actual material of the armor look less plastic and more metallic, like I imagine a Space Marine armor is. But for now, the sharp markings are enough, as I move to go over the orc head and rocks, shading them to match the rest of the scene. The entire left side of the head and every single tooth each get a dark blob cover that is promptly faded down to semi-transparency. While I'm there, I take the chance to texture and add some more details, including the tusk bone fibers, bleeding gums, and some nasty gashes, complete with lighting and some more blood coming out of its nose. I decide to make the rocks darker and paint them in a texture more akin to asphalt than concrete. Keyword here is paint, as I rather like the result I got from my last video, even if I still need to be in a very specific mindset to commit to the process. I play with some textures, trying to replicate the rocks from the Chainsaw Man poster I reference, but I dislike the results that I was able to achieve, so as I mentioned, I end up going with asphalt. Once I finish the shattered rocks that are probably a highway some demon crashed Denji into, I go back to add the final details on our demon boy's armor. With the metal and other materials thoroughly scratched and damaged and looking fine, I wanted to give the Chainsword man a battlefield presence that would rival even the Titans. Some final touches to his power glow, and we're done. Let's take a look. Hell yeah! Chainsword Man! I wanted to make this mashup since before I even started the channel. I had no interest in either Chainsaw Man or Warhammer 40k before starting this video, as I was drawn to the aesthetic most of all. But then, while drawing, I watched Chainsaw Man and listened to Warhammer 40k lore and did some reading and research and talked with friends who are in the hobby, and I fell in love with both of those. I'm very happy that I got to make this video. It was a short process with not a lot of planning, but I think it fits, and it turned out really well, in my opinion. If you want to support me so I could make more stuff like this and like my other videos, I have a Patreon. I upload sneak peek images and memes from the creation processes of my video, and I'm planning to add some more things in the future. Even if you don't want to or can't join for any reason, you could like and subscribe and share the videos to your friends or foes, all for free. It would really help me if you would. A final note before we wrap up, I'm shifting the video schedule from once every month on the 10th to every 4 weeks on Thursday. Drastic, I know. This is honestly for my own scheduling reasons, but I figured I should tell you so you'll know when to expect the next mashup. That was a longer ramble than usual, and I'm just making it longer. I hope someone stayed to listen. If you did, thanks for watching. Tell me in the comments what you want to see next, and for now, bye!